Celtics Reddit Podcast.
Back out to Smart. Fakes the pass all the time. Three. Bang!
Gets Williams screen. Lobs it up for Robert Williams.
Shouldn't he know? Jaylen Brown. What a thunder!
Tatum. Durant, the long reach. Tatum crossover, pull-up jumper. It's good! 50 points for Jason Tatum.
Hello and welcome to the Celtics Reddit Podcast. Ben Vallis here. Thank you for joining us. Hope you're doing well. We've got plenty coming up on the show for you despite a relatively quiet week. In fact, this whole episode will be one giant Reddit recap, looking at some of the top posts from Celtics Reddit over the past week. Joining us for all of that and more, Jackson, aka Rickman Lives. Jackson, how you doing, sir?
Very well. It's great to be back. I think I can't remember the last time I was on here. It was probably summer league stuff. Ridiculous. So yeah, no, I'm very glad to be back and seeing your faces to get to discuss the real topics of the offseason. I'm sure.
Yeah, man. Very glad to have you back. And of course, our New Zealand correspondent, Joe, aka Nose Groats McFly. Joe, welcome back, mate. How's things?
Yeah, good. We've got the classic lineup. Got the original
OG
lineup.
crew.
Yeah, OGs. Oceana. Represent.
Now, as I mentioned up the top there, this is just going to be a full Reddit recap. Normally a small, tiny segment relegated to the end of every second or third episode. It's the off-season. It's the doldrums of said off-season. We've got nothing else to talk about other than what people are already talking about on Celtics Reddit. We're going to start with a post by user Bruins Lover, who posted Dennis Schröder will wear number 71 this season. Jackson, we'll start with you. What are your expectations for Schröder this season, and how does his wearing of said number 71 impact these expectations, if at all?
Well, I hadn't thought about what the number would bring to his game until just then.
Something.
So let me think about this. I don't know. I like that it's just a random ass I don't give a shit kind of number. I think they didn't he have like a fan like voting comp to see like what number would be. So I don't know if that's what won or what he just decided to go with. But yeah, it's cool. I mean, every time we talk about jersey numbers, I have to just like regurgitate something that I've said 1,000 times before. Just we have too many retired numbers. You force players to like create like choose these random ass numbers to just like, you know, try and make a brand out of them. Like Doncic is 77. That seems random enough, but it has a nice symmetry to it. Anyway, I digress. It hasn't impacted my views of him at all. 71's a cool number. Let's see how it goes. Yes.
What do you think, Joe?
Well, obviously, Javo, you know, they need to keep that particularly special number retired for Javo in case he decides to make an appearance for the Celtics this year. So I guess 71 may as well go for it. I like it. He seems like he might actually be a good sport. I thought he was going to be a dick, but he might not be. He might be all right.
So what's turned your feelings on him there, Joe?
Oh, he had that little post on Instagram was like, all right, we're going to do this once. All right, your best fumble the bag joke, you know?
Yep.
Posing with his Bugatti Veyron.
Yeah, it's all relative, eh?
Yeah, a bit of self-deprecation is very endearing.
It goes a long way, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So Reddit user in the post for this comment here, Wiser Student 557, who wrote, "That's a fun and unusual number, but I'm cool with backwards 17." And TS Dibbs followed up with first player in the entire league to wear 71 since 1965. I didn't do my due diligence here and go back and do the deep dive into like who was the last player to wear this number and quiz you guys, but I'm just going to throw it up here. Like, any of you guys have any idea who wore 71 in 1965 or prior?
The Celtics or anyone?
Anyone. This is actually, he's the first Celtic to ever wear number 71. It's kind of outside of jurisdiction.
I read it, but I can't remember the name, you know.
I'm going to say Normie Hausen.
Oh, yeah, let's come up with some names.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Hagen.
He's from Yugoslavia, is he?
Yeah.
It was his parents migrated. His parents migrated after the war. Hagen Riverside. That's this is like the scene from The Usual Suspects where like he's like, I was in a barbershop quartet in Skokie, Illinois.
I've Googled it and it was actually Michael Bevan. There you go.
Michael Bevan. Of course it was.
Only the greatest cricketer to ever live. Clutchest cricketer to ever live, but we digress.
Definitely.
I don't think we've had a chance to get either of your thoughts just quickly on Schröder's like contribution or expected contribution on the court this year, Joe? Like, do you think he's going to be a particularly impactful player, or is he more likely to get traded than anyone else on the roster?
I think he's probably going to find himself in a role that suits him, eh? So I think he will be pretty impactful. Often guys who are really a bit selfish, they're good when they're sort of put in the box and say, you go be selfish. Your job is to score. Yeah, you know, like Jordan Crawford's a liability, but then all of a sudden with the Jazz as sixth man, you know, all of a sudden he's an asset. Same with Lou Williams, right? I sort of see him in that vein. So I reckon he'll go good.
Yeah, we've got him for his contract year essentially. So he's got no money coming after this. So he's got to convince someone out there to give him, you know, the kind of money that he wants, or at least the maximum amount he can get. So I think he's going to be a great sport, and I think if he can somehow infiltrate the starting lineup, then that elevates the defense immediately. And I think he averaged like 6 assists last year or thereabouts. So, you know, as far as a playmaker goes, that's only an asset. But if he can elevate the ceiling of the bench, or can at least like bring some, you know, proper scoring off the bench, then I think that's going to be a huge asset. So hopefully he does, you know, live up to this billing that I've just bestowed upon him. But yeah, it's positive for me.
It does feel like, you know, in last season, I don't know. I'm making it up. You know, my memory might be a little fuzzy at this point. It was all of 6 weeks ago that the last season ended. But it does feel like the pressure seems to build on us when we stop scoring. You know, that's when we stop sort of scoring, and then we really struggle to score, and we try to make it all back at once. You know, we just need someone to keep the score ticking over. Not unlike Michael Bevan.
Nice throwback there. 4 free throw attempts per game last season for Schröder, which in limited minutes, like non-starters minutes for most of the season, is pretty good, I suppose, just clearly demonstrating at least an ability to get to the line with some consistency. But only shot 43.7% from the floor with 3 turnovers per game. Jackson, you mentioned the assists there. I pulled it as 4 assists per game off
right.
NBAstats.com. But like clearly able to contribute, but like clearly has some glaring or like some inconsistencies in his game that he needs to address. But I think that his fit in the Celtics squad versus his fit in that, or lack thereof of the fit with the Lakers squad last year, hopefully will give him a better opportunity to shine. But we'll see. Season's right around the corner.
More optimistic, he'll be more of Oklahoma City Dennis Schröder than Lakers, but you know, of course I would be.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to move on to another post now from user Southern Update, who created a thread based on a Zach Lowe podcast. So he says Zach Lowe's starting 5 for the Celtics: Smart, Brown, Tatum, Horford, and Rob Williams. Joe, how does this align with your own starting lineup predictions for this upcoming season?
I don't know that it's stretchy enough. I think that lineup might lack a little dynamism. I mean, it makes sense. Those are the 5 guys with the most name recognition. But yeah, I think I'm leaning towards the Spoons school of thought, and La Bird, if you're out there, La Bird. I'm sure La Bird would be the same. I think Neesmith's going to start a lot. And let's be honest, Williams is going to be out for a significant period of time this year. He's going to get injured. So so when that happens, it would be interesting to see a lineup with Neesmith in there in place of Williams, maybe.
Yeah. Jackson, you agree with that, or you got another take?
Yeah, my impression would be that's more the closing 5, provided, you know, everyone's still, you know, hasn't given away 6 fouls and whatnot, but that's something that the lineup I'd probably trust the most to close at this stage. As far as the start is concerned, I think that will... Again, we don't know what Ime Udoka's like as a coach. You know, he could be tinkering all the time. He could have different players starting for different nights, and he might favor some guys over others. So it's really just a yes at this point. But I mean, that's probably the safest bet as far as I'm concerned. Like, maybe you would probably err on the side of caution if you're going for a defensive mindset. Maybe you slot Josh Richardson in there in the place of Horford or Williams. One of them just swaps over and whatnot. So it's hard to say, but I would fancy that more as the closing lineup than anything else.
Yeah, it's interesting because Brad Stevens was so prone to switching up the starting lineup and the closing lineup like completely based on matchups. And like, yeah, you say we don't know Ime Udoka yet Is he prone to doing the same thing, or is he more about like developing continuity and consistency with a single lineup approach for every game over the course of a regular season? There certainly are scenarios where having Rob Williams and Al Horford on the court together could be useful. Reddit user Isa Money wrote, the 4 in the NBA, though, is just not what it was. Got to be more mobile than Al, except when he has a good matchup. And another user followed up, JWD2213, with, what if Rob is your 4 on defense and your 5 on offense, and vice versa with Al? Do any of you guys see that format working at all?
I don't love Williams guarding guys off the dribble. Whether he would be, I mean, is it fair to assume he'd be in situations like that more often if he was in the 4? Maybe. I don't know. There's something about it that just doesn't, I mean, I'm happy to see it happen and, see what develops out of it, but there's something about it that just doesn't strike me as thinking it'll really work. I guess I'm concerned that Horford's not. I'm concerned he's not going to shoot with the volume we need him to shoot with to make that particular lineup work. It's probably my main concern. But really good passes, I still want to see it, I guess, but I'm skeptical that it's going to be the one that makes it cook for us. What do you reckon, Jackson?
Well, I guess if you think about it, really, it's going to be the lineup that just complements, Tatum the most. So if that means more movement, if that means, the qualities that Al Horford would bring over, having Williams out or etc., then I think that's ultimately what it's going to boil down to. But it's too hard to say for me.
I think another thing, and just to keep in mind, is how many of us actually watched Horford last year? Because I didn't, even though I wanted us to trade from.
Barely played, didn't you?
I've got no idea whether he's slowed down or not. Not a clue. So we'll see.
My last memory of Horford is him in game 1 of that first round of the playoffs in the bubble versus Philly, where there was a moment, I think, where most Celtics fans were like, oh my God, Al Horford's going to beat us in this game. And you can sort of see, I don't know, maybe I was just being particularly paranoid that day, but I can see the series playing out with this sort of Al Horford redemption arc. And finally, he's found his groove there in Philly. Maybe that meant it required Ben Simmons to actually be out for him to find that groove. But either way, he's beating his old team. He made the right decision. And I went on this sort of negative mental spiral here. That didn't happen, but he was still fairly spry in that series. And he was a threat at times to our defense. So that was obviously over one season to go, but he has had significant rest between then and now. Then again, I know this from getting older that sometimes rest equals rust. So I guess I'm not really drawing a conclusion here, am I? I'm very excited to see how it works out. But I definitely think, to draw back to the original point here, it's a situational lineup that we will see at times. But the lowered expectations for this season afford you the opportunity to start Aaron Nesmith, I think. And that's sort of maybe not something that we've been granted in recent seasons past. Now's the time. And Jackson, you mentioned it's all about enhancing the skill set of Tatum and maybe Brown to some extent as well. And I think the spacing on the floor that Nesmith offers there, and now I'm just reiterating Spoonie at this point, I think that does enhance the abilities of Tatum and Brown to have Nesmith out there. So that's my take on that. Yeah. Anything else before we move on?
I hope it turns out that way, for sure. Start Nesmith. I'm behind it, as we all should.
We're all disciples of the movement on this podcast. It's a prerequisite. You can't join if you don't believe in the cause. Joe's shaking his head like I don't want to reveal my alternate take.
No. I just think, look, man, I know this is a real boring take. It's almost like an anti-take, but we'll see, man. Horford was a really, really good player, and I was gutted that he left. And we don't really kind of know exactly what we're getting with him. He's a real unknown quantity, and let's just see. I think it's a bit of a sucker's game trying to make pronouncements too far in the future, I think.
That's what we got to do.
But that's what we're here to do.
Depths of the offseason. What else are we doing?
Yeah. Sweet. I'll go sold knock off now, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, speaking
Celtics
of
podcast suckers
pronouncements...
edition.
Yeah, speaking of pronouncements in the off-season, though, I was listening to another Zach Lowe pod today while I was shooting hoops, and Bobby Marks, on this podcast, he was a guest, obviously, said he's really high on the Celtics, yeah, saying that they might be the third best team in the East. So I dare I throw back to you guys for even more pronouncements, but do you think that this is an accurate take?
It's an optimistic one for sure.
Very much so.
I believe they can. I believe they can be. There's just way too many unknowns. It's going to come down, I think, the most to Tatum and what kind of season he has. If he has MVP level, season, then the 3 is definitely possible. If the Nets, all just go down with Achilles injuries, which is possible, then that elevates us one up. But I think the East is really interesting this year. So it's way too hard to say. I think any number of teams from 3 to 7 could occupy any order. So I really don't know at this stage.
Well, I don't know, but I do kind of have a little bit of a meta commentary on the placement of the Celtics. And, it's not long ago that we made the Eastern Conference Finals with 2 really young guys taking us there. And the reason why last year was such a disappointment was because of the expectations involved. And I think that the vibe I'm getting from most prognosticators, Zach Lowe notably accepted, is the Celtics are sort of an afterthought, and that just doesn't really line up with, if last season was such a disappointment, it doesn't make any sense that you wouldn't kind of have higher expectations of the Celtics for this season. Does that make sense? It's last season was a disappointment because we have a lot of talent and it didn't work out. We have as much, if not more, talent this year. Whereas, to me, there should be more expectation from the media if they're going to be kind of consistent with their prior takes. Anyway, but as to the actual substance of the point he was making, I'm not a huge believer in Miami or Atlanta this year. Just not because I have any particular basketball analysis. It just doesn't smell right to me. The Heat are taking on Kyle Lowry. The guy's going to be too old at some point. Maybe this is the year, The Heat haven't actually been really very good in any particular year. They were just okay, really, in the Butler year, and they got lucky to get to the finals. They're not that good. Atlanta, I'm not that convinced about Trae Young. So, yeah, I'm why not?
Yeah, it seems like each contending team outside of the Bucks and the Nets don't have enough of a proven sample size, I guess, as far as, there's enough for us to draw on there to be able to really determine on how they're going to do in the upcoming season. And with the moves that the Celtics have made, we kind of also fall into that category as well. But if you classify the changes that the Celtics have made throughout the offseason as improvements, then you do kind of have to go into the season feeling a little bit more optimistic. And then you throw in those lowered expectations from the media, sort of broader NBA sphere standpoint. It puts us in good stead as fans. And we've been doing this podcast long enough now that the sort of expectation versus results ratio means more than almost anything for every individual season. And that particular ratio going into this season might be the most favorable that we've seen, since we've started this podcast.
Where do you take your cue for the expectations you have of the team from?
I have no marker. That's the thing. This is the biggest unknown season in a long, long time. And it's the first season without Stevens, obviously. That's and it probably all stems from that. But there's no real tangible data point that I can attach to and say, yeah, well, we should be better than this or should be worse than that. Too many variables as far as I'm concerned. If everyone's kind of tempering their expectations and would be happy with something like a 6th or a 5th, then sure. I mean, wasn't that the vibe last season? I think everyone had sort of taken a step back, and I feel like we're in the same place now. But there's been no real earth-shattering change. I mean, I think the coaching change is massive, but no trade or no real sizable shift in the roster. So I don't think it's drummed up enough hype for people to be on board with that. I think the expectations of 5th or 6th are probably fair. So if we can if we can exceed that even just a little bit, then I think everyone's going to have, it'll be a positive season, and the expectations probably would reflect that where they are now.
here's the thing, sheeple. If you're taking your cue from the national media, yeah, sure, 5th or 6th seems about right. I just don't buy that for a second. Don't buy it for a second. I absolutely expect the Celtics to be in 3rd or 4th.
Well,
absolutely, I expect them to be there. Look, if they're not, then, you know, we kind of come back to some of my other chat, which is, you know, are the Jays for real, you know? And I'm undecided as to whether I think that they're, you know, enough to drive winning at the highest level. But hell yeah, they can drive winning in the regular season, man. Come on. Like, have we forgotten what they did, like, in the 3 previous seasons, you know, or at least 3 out of the 4 previous seasons to this? Come on, man. Like, they should be good, and they should be, you know, and improving. I have way higher expectations than 5th or 6th.
Well, one thing that could influence the overall seeding for the Celtics is another team completely dropping out of the mix. And in this case, that could be, it's early days here, but the Philadelphia 76ers. This goes to a post by Horseshoe Overlook, and it's just an ESPN tweet. It goes on to say the Philadelphia 76ers All-Star Ben Simmons will not report for opening of training camp next week and intends to never play another game for the franchise. Simmons hasn't spoken to the team since a late August meeting when he communicated this message to Sixers officials. Now, Joe, we released a pod solely on this topic a couple of weeks ago, but some new details have emerged since. Jackson, as the other token Australian on this podcast, are you ready to banish Ben Simmons from the nation? Like, what are your thoughts on the situation overall?
I didn't banish when he bailed on the Olympics, to be perfectly honest, so changes nothing for me. To be real, like, the majority of the hate I hang on him is just purely because he's a Sixers player. That's it. If he was playing for, you know, the Warriors or the Trailblazers, any other team, I'd be like, yeah, whatever, that's fine. But now, like, the way that it's transpired and the more that it's sort of, like, leaking out, like, what kind of person he is, or, you know, at least the people he surrounds himself with that are convincing him to have this stance, it's really rotten, yeah, and it's very un-Australian, Joe, wouldn't you agree? So yeah, no, but get rid of him. It sounds like he has a fake accent anyway. Like he's had one foot like out of the Australian, you know, way of life for
Not
years,
a real
as far as
Australian.
I'm concerned. No, absolutely not.
Not authentic.
You know, yeah,
He's in that Russell Crowe grey area where you guys have previously claimed him, and now you're trying to return him back to Senate.
But it's like he never won an Oscar. It's like he never won an Oscar. It's like he made a couple films, like, oh, he's gonna be real good one day. It just never happened. Never had his Gladiator.
Yeah, I like to throw Mel Gibson's name in the hat there as well while we're on the subject.
Yeah.
Joe, would you echo that sentiment?
Oh man, to be honest, I got a little bit distracted because I was trying to find a YouTube version of this very famous ad in New Zealand with little kids, and there's an Australian kid. These little kids. Oh, this is not going to be good podcasting, but I'm just going to go for it anyway.
We can show it on the pod. That's all good.
I believe.
I just put it in the chat. So the pitch of the ad is there's these little kids, and they're pretending to be like dads, and it's an ad for Mitre 10. Mitre 10's like a hardware chain over here, like Bunnings.
Yeah, we've got it here.
Sort of small. You got Mitre 10?
Yeah,
you bet.
got one up the road, mate.
Hard out. I thought you guys were Bunnings all day. Anyway, so these two kids are like,
what are you doing this weekend? I'm putting up a retaining wall. Do it yourself? No, I'm going to get some broken. Oh, come on, mate, do it yourself. She's a pretty big job. Oh, you'll be right. You reckon? We can knock it over in half a day. Yeah, get a couple mates around. Hey, Josie! Huh? Give us a hammer for job Saturday. Mate, you're dreaming. Aussies. Oh, no surprises there.
typical Aussies, you know. and that's what I thought. That's what I thought when I thought about Ben Simmons. He is un-Australian. I think my position on Ben Simmons has been well covered on the podcast. I'm still a really big believer in him. But he is un-Australian, and I do feel very sorry for you guys that this has kind of worked out like this.
Yeah, is it fair to say? And first of all, if you do want to hear Joe and I's takes on that Ben Simmons situation, specifically through a Celtics lens and how he might fit on the team, then go back a couple of weeks in our feed and you'll find that episode there. Joe and Jackson, is it fair to say that as far as the NBA is concerned, there is sort of a shared ownership among like Australian and New Zealand players? Like I sort of feel the same affinity towards Steven Adams as I would towards Patty Mills. Does that go both ways, Joe? Like, do you feel a certain ownership towards Australian players as well because it's like close enough?
Yeah, I actually do. The accents are similar enough that they feel familiar, and there's a cultural similarity, like to me and Joe Ingles, that really isn't present for 99% of the NBA. So yeah, I cheer for Australian players because I feel, I feel a cultural identification with them.
Moving on, this is posted by Boston Basketball Boys. The Smart/Rob extensions looking pretty great right now, and some context there. This is based on a report by Morton Jensen of Forbes.com, who, to summarize here, the NBA is looking into signing a new broadcasting contract aiming at over $75 billion that will compensate the league with $8.3 billion annually. According to a league source, projections indicate that a $171 million salary cap is possible, assuming no cap smoothing by 2025. This is news, although with no immediate impact to the Celtics. But Joe, does this change your perception of, I guess, to start with, the Time Lord and the Marcus Smart extensions?
Probably. I don't think I'd really factored in like a massive increase in the cap because, like, quick maths, if it's $8.3 billion a year, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what they're talking? So,
yep.
Some quick maths is like it's like $140 million a team, like a year, I think.
Can't help
if
you
you
there,
say 50%, so 8.3 divided by 2 is about 4.15 or whatever divided by 30. You're looking about $140 million a team. Like that's all of a sudden. That's just your baseline basketball-related income, which has to go under the cap. So, all of a sudden, the Smart extension at $20 million is it's like less than 1/7 of the cap. That's not too bad. Yeah. So yes, it does make him look a lot more favorable.
Yeah. If those are the numbers, and he is an accountant, guys, so I would definitely believe him. Yeah, I mean, I like the extensions to begin with, whether or not they meant, that they were going to be players that we held on to for the long haul, or whether they were part of a trade package next season or whenever. I like the extensions, and I like, the players that they went to. So if they've become far better in value now, then even better. It's good.
Yeah, Reddit user Washable Axe wrote on the thread, just kind of like bringing everyone, including myself, back down to earth. They said, this is actually terrible news for us. Both Jays can get new deals in that offseason, and this would only affect the final year of the Smart Time Lord extension. So it's only like 1 year at the tail end of their contract where they really, really look like good, solid contracts. So I don't know. It's almost bad timing for the Celtics in that, like, as soon as that extra cap room becomes available, we've got to fill it up with contract renewals for our two best players. So maybe if they apply cap smoothing in this situation, they didn't last time. We saw the effects of that. We saw the Evan Turner contract. It's very unlikely to happen this time, from what I can tell, because the players are unlikely to agree to it for obvious reasons. They want that money as soon as possible. I just
that's
don't.
So, this is one of my hobby horses. That's the dumbest thing ever.
Yeah,
they're going to get the money. They're going to get the money. They're going to get their percentage of basketball-related income no matter what.
Sure.
And it honestly, it severely negatively impacted the NBA not having the cap smoothing proposal affected the last time. That's what led to Durant going to the Warriors.
Yeah.
It led to Durant going to the Warriors, and that the NBA is not as big as it was back then. It's just not. Mm-hmm. And I put that squarely with Michelle Roberts. Squarely with her, man. Anyway, sorry. That's a topic for another pod.
It's a really good point. And like I asked this to both of you, do you think that will then influence the decision to go or not to go with cap smoothing this time around? Do you think it actually makes it maybe more likely?
I don't want to jump onto Spoons' sort of territory, but like this is hey, look, I could be wrong here. I'm no expert, but like the players are, as per the collective bargaining agreement, they're entitled to 50% of basketball-related income, right? So let's just say that total basketball-related income for the year was $6 billion. Okay, and so it's a 50-50 split. All right, that means that $3 billion goes to the players, and it goes to them in the form of salaries. So 30 teams divided by $3 billion is $100 million cap per team. Okay, everyone signs contracts on that. Let's say that the next year, like revenue goes up from $6 billion up to let's say $9 billion, right? So another 50% on top of that. My understanding is that like let's say all the contracts were exactly the same. So there was $100 million in committed contracts for each team over the year, in the following year. They would be topped up by they would be topped up. Each player's contract would be topped up so that the total amount paid out to the players is 50%. So the nominal value of your contract might be say 10 million, but everyone gets an extra 50% because the players have to get paid out 50% of basketball-related income. Does it make sense so far, Jackson?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So what that means is that you don't have this shock whereby the nominal value of players' contracts becomes way too low relative to the cap, which is what happened last time, right? Like you had all these contracts signed pre-2016 were just so much lower than they would have had they all been free agents in the summer of 2016, right? That's what led to the shock. That's why Timofey Mozgov got paid heaps of money. It's because there was nowhere else for the Lakers to spend the money. Like they could have maybe done a few less years, but that's why Evan Turner got heaps, because it was just they had to spend the money.
Gotcha.
And the cap space created the vacuum that was filled by these bad salaries. And it's bad, man. It just upsets the competitive balance of the league. It's a real shock to the system, and it's bad for the league. It's bad for us as consumers of the league. It's bad for us as fans, and I'm pretty firm on this.
Yeah,
I'm pretty firm. I've got
been very thought out.
Strong opinions on this.
I totally agree with you. From the players' standpoint, though, particularly some of the higher earning players, relative to the league annual average salary there, it's almost like that social experiment where they put kids in a room with a jelly bean on the table, and you say, you can have this jelly bean now, or if you leave this jelly bean alone, then in 5 minutes you can have 2 or 3 jelly beans. And they almost always just eat the jelly bean that's in front of them because that's I don't know, it's a short-sighted, I want my beans now. Obviously, it's not a like-for-like analogy, but you understand, the players obviously have this immediate influx of additional salary dangled in front of them.
But they're going to get that salary anyway. They're going to get the money.
But what
it benefits free agents.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree with you, Joe. I'm just trying to look at it through the lens of a multi-million-dollar earning 25-year-old, which I'm clearly not capable of doing.
Well, I imagine they just want to give as much money to their families and look after themselves in case they have a career-sustaining injury. Because if it happens and before they get their payday, then that's it, done. It's a new career, it's a new earning and stuff. So I understand where they're coming from, and they're get it now. But the way that you've put it, obviously it's a bad idea.
I still don't get it, because if you've got coming from an environment where the cap's been somewhat stable, salaries are going to be roughly, assigned to players in order, in some sort of reflection of their contribution to, or their importance to their teams, right? Okay. The cap spike happens, then all of a sudden you could be a really important player to your team, and then you're really underpaid relative to someone else. This is what happened. I don't know if you remember when John Wall was I can't believe Reggie Jackson's making more than me. Mm-hmm. Well, the reason that happened was because of the cap spike. Because these salary figures are nominal and they're fixed under an old cap, and the cap increases. You wind up with a situation where high status players can really lose out to mediocre players who happen to be free agents in the right period of time. It's I think it creates a lot of unfairness. I don't know whose interest it's in. Anyway, it's a bit fiery. I don't know how I'm going to go to sleep now. My heart's pounding.
Yeah, it might be something we revisit in a future episode because I think I'm interested to hear more about the players' incentive to go away from cap smoothing and just go for the immediate sort of knock up in salary cap.
I think the most basic argument is it would restrict player movement, right? So the more cap space is available, the more movements available, the more options are available to the players in that particular free agency class.
Yeah.
To be honest though, like it's one of those things where it's like it's very hard for me to truly grasp the other side of an argument that I just think's crazy. You know how like you've got to have a certain amount of respect for the other side.
It's hard. You're only human.
Yeah. I just don't get it. Anyway.
All right, well, look, we've got 2 more posts to get to before we wrap this one up. This one's by our mate, Wayne Spooney, who is the king of original content on the sub these days.
Isn't he?
And he made a write-up titled 15 Players, 15 Stats to Watch, and 15 or More Bad Jokes. And it's a long post. It's a very worthwhile read, and I'm not going to try and summarize it at all because I wouldn't do it justice. But if you haven't read the post, highly recommend going to check it out because it's very informative and it'll put you in better stead to evaluate the season coming up. But just to summarize it very quickly for the purpose of this discussion, Spooney listed 15 players on the team and 15 stats to watch as sort of a measure of improvement for those individual players. And I wanted to ask you guys, out of those 15 stats, which stood out to you the most, or is there something else that wasn't included that you think should be on this list?
Probably the one about Jaylen Brown and his like overall plus minus with Tatum on, or something to that extent anyway. Yeah, I think like really the key for us moving forward is probably those two maximizing the production they get out of each other. So that was something, as soon as I read it, I was like, yes, this here, totally. So that grabbed my attention. As far as like other stats are concerned, I don't know, man. Wayne's a very like comprehensive dude, so like it's everything's there that I needed. But the Jaylen Brown one for sure for me.
Yeah, what about you, Joe?
For me, it was the Smart and Tatum stats. The Tatum stat, I wasn't even aware it was one. It's like percentage. It's like percentage of time you pass it when you do a drive.
Pass percentage on drives, yeah.
I was like, whoa, didn't know that was a stat. My own experience playing is that I'm a way more effective passer on drives when I'm aggressive and thinking score. Like if you go in there and you're not looking to score, you know, I feel like that takes away passing opportunities. I feel like the defense reacts to you a little bit differently, but that may be different if you're Jason Tatum. Yeah, but the Smart one's an interesting one. If the ball needs to touch the paint, that's the fundamental of any basketball offense. It's got to hit the paint in some way, and typically that happens via point guards penetrating. If Smart's able to do that, then it makes him a very effective offensive engine. I think he's a really good passer. I'm skeptical that that's really in his game. We know who he is at this point, you know, and I love him for it. Don't want to trade him, but I don't know that he's the guy that's really going to be a high frequency driver to the rim. But if he was, it would be to me it'd be quite a big change in his game.
Yeah.
And it would be a really positive one, sure. It's what stuck out to me. Anyway.
No, it's a good call out on both fronts, but Spooney does mention in the post on the Marcus Smart drives per game situation that, yeah, it will be interesting to see if his drives per game do creep up with a more defined role as opposed to seasons prior. If you can carry this number into double digits, oh, baby, we got a stew going. Nice Arrested Development reference there. Good on you, Spooney. The one that stood out to me the most was the Rob Williams 112 defensive rating, which ranks him 78th among centers who play 15 minutes or more per game. Just like from an eye test perspective, think, oh, Rob Williams, the Time Lord, like he's just blocking shots. He's defending James Harden out on the perimeter and blocking him shooting threes, which no one does. Just, yeah, from that eye test perspective, Rob Williams is like an elite A-grade defender. But, you know, 78th among centers who play 15 minutes or more per game, examples of centers who rank above him are Daniel Tice, Jakob Poeltl, Alex Len. Like, these are not that's not the company you expect Rob Williams to be in from a defensive standpoint. And of course, he does have just a positive net rating at 0.04. But you just kind of expect him to have a better defensive rating, and he's going to need to have that as, the potential starting five for the Celtics and sort of locking down the paint there. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on that stat. Anything you want to touch on there on that post, guys, before we move on to our last point here?
Well, I was just going to say, in the case of Rob, bearing in mind, of course, I'm making this up largely. I always felt like when I looked at him that he was, like Charles Barkley talks about guys who are light in the ass, and Rob Williams is definitely light in the ass. And I haven't looked this up, but I wonder what his defensive rebounding percentage is. I don't know. It could be really good, but my impression of him watching him as a rookie was it felt like he got a little pushed around, and it didn't feel like he cleaned up as much as I might have expected. I shouldn't say rookie, as a second year player, but played bugger all as a rookie. So that would be maybe something I'd be watching. Like, is he gonna, if he cleans up the rebounds, man, that would just, wouldn't it be so nice to watch a Celtics team that rebounded the ball?
Well, he can learn from Enes Kanter, so lucky him.
Yes, savvy veteran Enes Kanter on the bench there, barking out instructions. To wrap it up here, this is the final post here from user Arya Ramirez, who posted the NBA Top 100 rankings. So this is Sports Illustrated list of the rankings of the top 100 players ahead of the upcoming season. They've got Jaylen Brown at 27 overall and Jason Tatum at 13. Jackson, is this a fair ranking, or are the Jays ranked too high or too low, or how does this sit with you?
How many 100 lists come out before every season? This is Sports Illustrated. Obviously, NBA.com is going to do one, and then probably Athletic's going to do one, and etc. Yep. Anyway, I'll answer the question. It's about right, isn't it? I mean, I would if I've obviously seen it, so it's going to be completely unfair to sort of like mentally do an exercise where I didn't know it and had to guess prior. But I probably would have had Jaylen Brown around 30, to be fair. Like, I think that's probably about as good as you can go. Tatum, 13, is a terrible take. I'm sorry. I have nothing to really add to it. It seems pretty accurate to me. I wonder, but what I was getting at with the first thing, I wonder how like other like publications will see him, or whether it's going to be fairly consistent, because that to me seems pretty accurate.
Yeah. What do you think, Joe?
Well, I was just looking at the comment from End As We Know It, who says they'd rather have JB than Middleton right now. And hey, look, mate, like, we're all just having fun here. We're just firing off our takes. But what? Like, have you seen Middleton play? Like, I know he's not as sexy as Jaylen Brown. He's better right now. Like, no question about it. That's crazy talk.
Yeah, but if you're the Celtics, right, and you're building towards some sort of future, and you've got
that's
Tatum
fine.
as
Different
well.
discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
But in a vacuum, it's Middleton.
Right now, and that just goes to show, because you don't think of Middleton as being like you're not going out and buying Chris Middleton's jersey. You're not like trying to find his RPA or whatever. But he's one of those guys that you have to contend with if you want to become he's a guy who you have to overtake if you want to become 20th best player in the NBA. If you want to go from 30th to 20th, he's somewhere in there, I just think, man, like, you got to be respectful of those dudes between like 30 and 10, ranked players. There's so many of them when you start to list them out. I think those rankings seem fine.
Yeah, I think 13, I think Jaylen Brown is hovering around the right spot there at 27. Tatum sort of fluctuates depending on who you ask. And so, what you mentioned there, Jackson, how many of these lists come out prior to the season starts. It's kind of it's almost a good idea to keep an eye on these lists, because I think that there's going to be a lot of variance as far as where Tatum shows up on that list. And you can sort of, form an average, really. What is the mean ranking for Tatum across all of these lists, and then maybe get a better idea of, fan base and league-wide where he's perceived to be. Because, you can count off 15 players like fairly easily that you could easily say are better than Jason Tatum. But then you can kind of rightfully go in there and insert Jason Tatum into that list. So I don't know. I guess the takeaway there is that
you couldn't give me 20 that are better than him, but you probably could give 15. So
I agree with that.
It feels like it's like right in the middle, you know?
Yeah, and I guess the main takeaway is like how much can we really derive from these lists? Like who, like obviously they've assigned an author to this list, but like who really, like what kind of research goes into it? Reading the paragraphs that are sort of assigned to each player name here, it's not like they've done this huge statistical evaluation for all of these players. Like they're very short little blurbs for every player. But I guess from the fan perspective, it's nice to see two of our guys in the top 30. And Marcus Smart, by the way, is ranked number 60 as well. So it's a nice little... Absolutely, yeah. He's going to bump up after this season, I'm sure, in this more defined role. Guys, we're very close to Media Day, which I believe is 5 days away. We're 11 days away by the time this podcast goes live until the first preseason game. Obviously, we're going to have a lot more to discuss as those things occur, but is there anything else you want to sort of get off your chest before we wrap this one up?
Didn't you guys used to pine for Media Day? Like it felt like it took forever, and then finally we're at Media Day. I missed the length of the off season. You know,
I do not.
It hasn't felt the same. Haven't felt the same vacuum.
What about you, Jackson? I'm really feeling it over here. It feels like it's been going on forever.
Yeah, I know it's sort of like my interest in it sort of like, you know, bottomed out after the Olympics, and it's slowly ramping back up now. When you said 11 days to the preseason, like I got a little tingle in me, so I didn't realize it was that.
There you go.
And the giblets.
Yeah, right where it counts. Media Day, I'm looking forward to. Like my one lasting memory of Media Day is Kyrie Irving, clean shaven Kyrie Irving, and Gordon Hayward sitting next to each other, and me just thinking, here we go. And it didn't end well. So I wonder.
Start particularly well. Either,
no, it didn't. It didn't. That season was tops though, but for the reasons we did not anticipate. I wonder, because it's going to be so many things they're going to have to address. There's going to be Wick, it's going to be Brad, it's going to be Ime. Who's going to be the first player do you think they're going to have like sitting next to the coach or whatever? Is it going to be Al? Is it going to be Dennis Schröder? I'm kind of interested to see how they like lay the table out. 'Cause it's going to be everybody, right? Sitting at the front.
Yeah, I think it's
thought about seating configuration.
But it's almost like a gala, right? Like I don't really remember panels from Media Day. It's more like a gala where some guys are being interviewed, some guys are taking like those photos or those animations you see on the Jumbotron, and they're all kind of mixed. It's not like they're gathering everyone at once, but you know, there's always takeaways, there's always talking points to sort of come out of it, and I guess that's what I'm looking forward to.
Don't they have to do that bit where they all stand next to each other with their jerseys up?
Yeah,
that's
the new guys. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Whatever they're going to do.
No. That's when they get drafted. That's when they do that. They're actually wearing them on Media Day.
The press conference. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we get to see new guys in their Celtics jerseys for real and not just photoshopped. And like just from the podcast production standpoint, we've milked everything possible out of this off season. We've like continued to release podcasts, and huge shout out to Celtics Jay and Wayne Spooney, the new guys. For being a big part of that, but I feel like we've really got nothing else here, right? Like we need some real shit to happen, so we've got some real shit to talk about. This might be the last podcast of the off season. I'm not sure. All right, guys, I think that's going to do it for this one. Speaking of wrapping it up, if you like what you're hearing, please go ahead and subscribe, rate, leave a review, all that nice stuff. You can find us on Twitter at Celtic Reddit Pod, and of course now in the flesh on YouTube. Just Google us. We're out there. Jackson, Joe, love your work, guys. Thanks again.
Love yours too. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, good to see us.
Yeah, likewise. We'll be back early next week, we think. Until next time, go Celtics. Peace.